Hey everyone, it's Sato here. I've been playing Feral Druid for quite a while now. This spec is quite underrepresented in high-end gameplay, specifically in Mythic Plus scenario. Is Feral really that bad in keys? Of course it's not. I want to share you some of my very own advices and tips I have learned during my solo pack journey in current Dragonflight season. If you are trying to push high keys as Feral, you have overall knowledge and grasp of the spec, but you somehow struggle to succeed in keys, this guide is for you. You may be missing some details and adjustments. Including them may result in overall improve of your performance. That is why I encourage you to take some tips from me because I've been at your spot not very long time ago. Please take a seat and watch carefully. Enjoy. As a disclaimer, before we start, I want to let you know that I am not a theory crafter. All of the content included in this video comes from my own experience, research and comparisons. This is not a basic guide for beginners. My assumption is that you know basic stuff including rotations, skills, gearing, stat priorities, and so forth and so on. All of these topics are covered in many other guides. I recommend both Wowhead Feral Guide and Dreamgroove Feral Compendium. Both these guides are comprehensive and very well done. I will leave links to the guides in the description below. Firstly, we need to have a glimpse of what is the current state of Feral in Mythic Plus. Feral was in a very bad spot not very long time ago, back in Shadowlands. We struggled a lot, getting into keys was a problem, as well as performing competitively when compared to other specs. However, at the start of Dragonflight, we have seen a huge rework in talent trees that affected Feral very much. I'm not gonna lie, there was some drama and early forecasts regarding rework were really bad. Well, but finally, the new talent tree and tuning added up with new Season 1 tier set made Feral quite good, both in Red and Mythic Plus. Some may even say Feral was meta in Season 1 of Dragonflight. At current point, in Season 3, Feral is doing pretty well and is very capable of completing high keys. With that being said, we have to admit it is not as forgiving as other specs. You have to perform very well just to be competitive with other mid-tier classes. For some this might seem frustrating and unfair. For me this is quite challenging and satisfying to outplay other specs and let other players know that Feral Druid is competent spec if played correctly. If played correctly is a very important condition. This is why you may feel like you are doing okay-ish, but somehow your overall damage is not as high as you might expect. If you are trying to fix that issue, let me cover some of the major problems that massively impact overall damage in key. Let's start with cooldown usage. Both Incarn and Convoke build are very viable. No matter what build you are using, you rely heavily on burst windows. Your main CDs are either Incarn or Convoke plus Berserk. Season 3 with current tier set provides small burst window which comes from Feral Frenzy and Smoldering Frenzy buff. This should be obviously synchronized with your major CDs, however you should use Feral Frenzy whenever possible because of its short cooldown. Feral Frenzy is nice filler whenever all of your other CDs are not viable. Don't overthink using that ability, just squeeze it whenever you can to buff your damage on specific pool. Unlike other classes, Feral's cooldowns take a lot of time to recharge. With that being said, you have to use it efficiently. Feral's damage comes from bleeds and dots, which take time to tick. The longer the fight is, the more dots, finishers, and abilities you can squeeze in order to deal damage and profit from your Incar or Berserk uptime. A general rule of thumb is using your big CD whenever it is possible and off cooldown. Do not bottle it and do not save it for later unless you are sure there is a big pool or boss fight upcoming next, not further than 2 minutes from ongoing fight. Bottling your CD off cooldown is a huge waste of overall damage. You have to take into account a mechanic of Heart of the Lion talent. Each combo point spent reduces the cooldown of your next Incarn or Berserk by half of a second. That is why you should not let your combo points cap, otherwise it leads to a huge waste of not only your combo points but also potential number of Zerg or Incarn uses. Spend your combo points at 5 or 4 during Zerg window. Use as many finishers as you can in order to not cap your combo points and in order to shorten your cooldown. Worst thing that can happen is dying on big pool right after using your Berserk. Not only you lose your burst window, but also you miss an opportunity to spend many combo points that would normally shorten your next Berserk cooldown. That is why you should always pop defensive CDs on big pools, just to make sure you stay alive. As you can see, the negative consequences of dying in burst windows are doubled. Cooldown usage is the most impactful factor when it comes to your overall damage. Saving your CDs for nothing, dying in burst windows, missing damage on big AoE pools affects your general DPS the most. As I mentioned before, your damage profile is heavily affected by bleeds and dots. If you look at your damage done, you will see it comes mostly from Rip, Rake and Primal Wrath. That is why, to do fine damage, you firstly need to ramp up and spread your bleeds. Then focus on keeping them and refreshing whenever you see they're about to end. Using flat damage abilities, especially Ferocious Bites, should not be your priority unless you see all of your dots are ticking or you have Ferocious Bite proc with a free cast. To keep a good track of your dots, I recommend using Feral Weakauras for main target and Custom Platter Profile for other targets. As you can see, it's easy to lose a track of your bleeds, specifically in huge AoE pools. Platter Profile indicates your bleeds uptime by using colors. Green bar means both of your main bleeds, Rip and Rake, are on the target. Orange bar means your Rake or Rip is about to end. Red bar means your target has no active Rip applied. Lack of bleeds equals to lack of damage. That is why tracking your bleeds is crucial. That may be challenging, but proper UI comes in handy. Speaking of bleeds, let's get back to the damage profile and breakdown. Rake is one of the most essential builders you should be prioritizing. Uptime of Rake is crucial and affects your overall damage. Rake and Brutal Slash should be your main combo point builders in AoE pools. Trash should be used as a filler in order to maintain bleed it provides and proc Blood Talon style. Do not overlook the importance of your Rake bleeds and do not use your builders randomly. If you have nothing to use, track your Rake and be sure you have good uptime on that bleed. Also keep in mind, Rake benefits from snapshotting. Snapshotting is a Feral specific mechanic. I will quote snapshotting explanation from Dreamgroove Guide. Snapshotting is when a buff that is present when a bleed is applied is maintained over the duration of the bleed, as opposed to buffing dots while the buff is up. For instance, if you rake a target and then press Tiger's Fury, the rake will not be buffed by Tiger's Fury. However, if you Tiger's Fury and then rake, that rake will be amplified by Tiger's Fury even after Tiger's Fury falls off. Rake snapshots Tiger's Fury and stealth. That means you should rake when Tiger's Fury is up and from stealth if possible. Rip snapshots Tiger's Fury and Blood Talons. Generally, you should try to maintain the strongest bleeds you can as much as possible. If you play Incarn build, you can re-stealth once during your Incarn window, even in combat. That lets you refresh your rake once from stealth, increasing its damage done and taking good use of snapshotting mechanic. Also, if you're a Night Elf, you can Shadowmeld and profit from bonus stealth snapshotting furthermore. To summarize this part, you should be aware that your overall damage comes mostly from dots, and that is why it is so important to prioritize applying tracking and refreshing all of your bleeds before the fall off, using Rake as a main filler and combo point builder, snapshotting your dots with Tiger's Fury and Stealth whenever possible. The main problem of doing damage is the fact that you have to stay alive to do so. Baseline of Feral survivability is quite low when compared to other classes such like Paladin or Rogue. In order to survive bursty pulls during fortified weeks or boss fights during tyrannical weeks, You have to actively use your defensive cooldowns, mainly Barskin and Survival Instincts. Barskin is a bread and butter cooldown that should be used whenever you expect huge unavoidable damage or when suffering from bleeds and dots applied on you. I recommend using Barskin few seconds into big pools as they can get a bit messy and lead to an unexpected death. Pop Barskin during Berserk or Incarn window to be sure your healer has some time to top you so you do not melt in seconds and lose your burst window opportunity. As I said in the previous part, there is nothing as crucial as staying alive during your Berserk or Incarn uptime. Survival Instincts is your major defensive cooldown that should be used in either of two circumstances. First, you're about to face heavy, unavoidable damage that is party-wide and is very likely to kill you. Good examples of these are AoE spells used by dragons in Dawn of the Infinite, or SOG mechanics during fight with last boss of Galakron's Fall dungeon. In case you're out of all your defensive CDs, the solution is very simple and always accessible. Simply shapeshift into Bear Form. Bear Form gives you 220% armor buff and 25% stamina buff. It can be used anytime in split of a second, which makes Bear Form a huge and highly overlooked major defensive cooldown that is not being used by many players. Yes, a Bear Form is a loss of a DPS, not as a huge loss as being wiped out or one-shotted by any ability that is being cast on you. Also, Bear Form comes in very handy during mechanics which force you to stop DPS and step away or run away from your party. There is simply no excuse to not use Bear Form in such cases. Pop it, get a hit, shift back to Cat Form and leap back to your target. Additionally, we have to mention your self-healing and off-healing abilities that should be part of your rotation as well. Renewal is 1.5 minute cooldown that heals you for 30% of your total HP. Pretty straightforward ability that should not be battled until you're down to 5% of your HP. Use it in advance, especially during unavoidable AoE damage, just to put off some stress from your healer. You can easily mitigate one tick of huge AoE damage with a single click. The same refers to your healing potion and healthstone, which should always be keybound and available for a quick use. When it comes to regrowth, that spell is well paired with Protector of the Pack talent. The talent allows you to kind of charge your next regrowth, with the damage done in between casts. If your regrowth is charged, it heals you on cast and additional HP as healing over time. When in danger, regrowth should be your first spell to cast on yourself to regain some HP. If you see one of your party members being affected by nasty dot, don't hesitate to cast your regrowth on them and potentially mitigate 1 or 2 ticks of their damage taken. Your regrowth should be bind as a mouse over macro in order to cast it quickly on your teammates. Regrowth is awesome for both self-healing and off-healing as it is quite powerful, instant and free to cast because of your talent spec. Your last defensive cooldown is Nature's Vigil. The way it works is it converts part of your damage done into healing nearby friendly target. In my opinion, it is quite underwhelming. The way it works is a bit passive and hard to notice. However, you should use that during your burst windows in order to help your healer with keeping everyone alive, as it does not require much attention from you. In the end of this part, I have to say that during high keys, many of your deaths from unavoidable or randomly aimed damage is at your fault. When it happens and you die, look at your skill bars. If you die with any of your defensive abilities off cooldown, with HP potion or healthstone available, or without Bear Form active, then the death is on you and you are not allowed to blame your healer. Play-wise, rotate your CDs, expect and calculate damage incoming. Also use your self-healing and off-healing abilities to help your team stay alive. As a feral, not only damage matters. You have to be aware of the amount of and quality of utilities you bring for your team. The higher you get into keys, the more important it is to execute your utility properly. In its toolkit, Feral has noteworthy crowd control spells and other abilities that should be used to control mobs' positioning and their casting. To start with, the most obvious picks when it comes to crowd controls are Ursol's Vortex and Typhon. Vortex is super useful against mobs who charge, dash, leap, or fixate on targets. Mobs that are present in Ataldazar, Throne of the Tides, or Everbloom. When affected by Vortex, mob trying to leap out of it will cancel its leap and will be put back into center of the Vortex. This is super useful, especially against Berserkers in Everbloom and fixated hounds in the Throne of the Tides. Typhon is super useful to cancel casts, group up mobs, and push them out of sanguine pools. Unfortunately, Typhon forces you out of cat form. However, most of the time it is worth to cancel crucial and deadly spells by hard iOS CC it provides. Typhon might be combined with Vortex on spread mobs. If you put Vortex on them and push them out of the circle, they will all group up together in the center of Vortex back again. That might be helpful for your tank during certain pulls. Another hard CC is Incapacitating Roar. It's AoE wide hard CC that cancels casts and puts mob into incapacitated state. It should be used whenever mass CC is needed to cancel dangerous casts, which cannot be interrupted by normal kick, or there is not enough kicks available to cancel all the casts. I cannot stress how important it is to use AoE CC. On certain pools, amount of casters makes it mathematically impossible to interrupt all the casts. Sometimes the abilities are just unable to interrupt at all, and then hard CC is the only way to prevent them from happening. Your party should be rotating mass CC and you should be part of that rotation. Not using CC toolkit is the first sign of unexperienced Mythic Plus player that comes to my mind. The higher the key, the most likely it is to get your group wiped because of that. Do not be that guy who sleeps on mass CC. In terms of CC, I have to mention that another viable and very useful combo is Stealth plus Rake. When used in Stealth, Rake stuns the target. As we said above, Rake might be used in Stealth on pull when out of combat, during in-card window, or with Shadowmeld. I often use Shadowmeld plus Rake combo to CC and cancel important casts when I see it's not likely to be interrupted by anyone else. If you are running Double Cloud Rake talent, use stun one additional target, which might be even more useful. Shadowmeld itself is very interesting ability as well. It works similarly to Hunter's Feign Death and the Rogue's Vanish. Shadowmeld not only puts you out of combat, but also cancels spells and abilities that are being cast on you. For example, during Rezan fight in Ataldazar, it completely cancels boss fixation mechanic. In Galakron's Fall, during Blight of Galakron's boss fight, it cancels Corazon orb mechanic, making it simply disappear and not happen. It's explained with more complexity in a Reddit thread in r/competitive WoW. I will leave a link to the thread in the description below video. Next utility I need to mention is Druid's Dispel, Remove Corruption. Feral has an ability to dispel all curses and poisons on 8 seconds cooldown. This is useful in many dungeons this season, including Weakauras Manor, Dark-Haired Ticket, Throne of the Tides and Everbloom. As a Feral, you can deal with many affixes in Mythic Plus. Remove Corruption allows you to handle afflicted affix, and you should always be using that talent during afflicted weeks. You are alone able to dispel both spirits if they happen to spawn both at the same time. If you dispel first one instantly as it spawns, your remove corruption will be off cooldown right before second spirit finishes its cast. Not only afflicted, but also incorporeal affix might be handled by Feral by using Hibernate spell. As previously said, you should always be ready to help with affixes, and in most cases you should take Hibernate for incorporeal weeks. Hibernate is suboptimal because of its hard cast time. However, you should always be ready to back up and help with the affix if no one else can do it before you. I recommend discussing it with your party before you start your key. You should Always establish who is responsible for nullifying the affix and who is responsible for backup. For raging weeks and certain dungeons like Everbloom or Ataldazar, Feral brings Soothe that allows to remove any rage effects of the targets. After Raging Affix rework, the importance of Soothe dropped down, but is still impactful since every mechanic matters when it comes to timing high-level keys. On top of that, you always bring for your teammates very important resources, which are Combat Res and Mark of the Wild buff. Personally, I'm very happy to see Mark of the Wild back in the game, since it's most of the most core and characteristic druid spells since vanilla. To summarize this video, I want you to memorize the most important information regarding Feral as a DPS spec in Mythic Plus. First, you rely heavily on your burst windows and big cooldowns. If you fail to use them effectively, your overall damage will be garbage. Your spec is mid-tier and unforgiving, so to be competitive with others, you need to perform very well. There is no room for mistakes. However, if you play wise, you can outplay and outdamage specs which are expected to perform much better than you. Second, you need to be aware of your damage profile. Your dots and bleeds are main source of damage. You have to keep a good track of them, refresh them, snapshot them if possible. Rake should be your main filler and combo point builder, while Primal Wrath should be your main AoE and cleave spender. Importance of Ferocious Bites is limited to free cast procs, single target fights, or funneling damage. Focus on your dots, be patient and consistent, then your overall DPS will improve. Third, you need to track your defensive cooldowns and use them in order to stay alive. If you die, your damage is non-existent. If you die during your burst window, things get even worse, and it will desynchronize and affect your further fights in this dungeon. Staying alive is top priority, otherwise your overall damage will collapse. Last but not least, use your utilities. Feral brings a lot to the table, but it's not obvious for everyone since the spec is very rarely seen and underrepresented. Help with all affixes you can. Make a good use of your mass CC and off-heal whenever your healer is struggling. Always try to fill the gaps that your teammates are missing. Druid always was and always will be jack of all trades. Maintaining this mindset lets you secure your teammates and prevent mana wipes from happening. Thank you for watching this video. If you have any questions, please let me know in the comment section. I hope my advices will help you to perform better in Mythic Plus. I hope Feral as a spec will be present more and more in Mythic Plus community. My goal is to help others improve and play the spec well and competitively. Thanks for your attention, don't hesitate to like the video and subscribe to the channel if you find my work any helpful for your gameplay.